Hello and welcome to Warframe Unabridged. I'm your host Finn, and today we're going to conclude our journey through the power kit of Atlas, with an unabridged look at his ultimate, Rumblers, as well as armor scaling within the context of Atlas's kit. To begin, Atlas needs very few things in life, but chief among them are power strength, raw melee damage, and armor. If you have these three things, you are already on the fast track to having a solid kit for the Titan among us. To a lesser degree, health duration and range are important, and pretty much in that order. Fortunately, you can usually fit most of these into a kit, making for generous portions of each. Power strength is his bread and butter though. Lacking power strength on Atlas is akin to having a Nyx without duration, in that it's a complete and utter waste of her kit. Without power strength, you will lose tens of thousands of damage on landslide, your petrify becomes a glorified stagger, or even just a slow effect that keeps draining your energy even after the slow ends. Your tectonics loses copious amounts of health, and his rumblers may as well be made of putty for all of their effectiveness in terms of durability. Melee damage is important if you plan to focus on landslide though, and if you recall my first video on landslide, you will see a fairly in-depth discussion on how landslide works with damage. The rule is pretty much this: just focus on raw damage, foregoing critical and status, because landslide barely ever procs either of them. What it does do is focus on raw damage, but again in copious amounts. He will deal copious amounts of raw damage, and it doesn't really need the multiplier anyway, so long as you aren't working with armored enemies, in which case they barely scale with the mods available, so you may as well skip that either way. Melee and armor on him are basically like yin and yang in the equation that equals an optimal Atlas. Armor is not only going to drastically help his health pool mitigate damage, but it also empowers his tectonics health and his rumbler's armor. Let me just say that I'm truly grateful for my friends for sticking it out with me in a long survival run to playtest how well this works with high levels. And while it was a blast, the results were nowhere near as promising as I thought that they would be. We all went equipped with Stand United. We had a Valkyr with a serious high-powered Warcry, Oberon with a high-powered Hollowed Ground, and as well as Hollowed Reckoning, and Chroma with an Icy Elemental Ward. So to supplement, I also had a full Arcane Guardian setup. All this just to see how well a min-max tectonics setup would work. And as I mentioned, the results weren't good. Despite having a series of tectonics that were around 50,000 health each, we walled off our entryway, and the Tide of Infested were simply too much for it to handle. And the health pool above the power icon dropped so fast it could have been mistaken for a stopwatch counting down. It was really that fast that they just completely destroyed them. As for Rumblers though, it's a bit of a different story. While tectonics factors armor into health, Rumblers takes Atlas's armor into account for their own armor, granting them damage mitigation, which goes much further than you may think. Now for the first build, Raimish. In this build, I equip Power Drift, Armored Agility, Primed Continuity, Blind Rage, Streamline, Constitution, Vitality, Steel Fiber, Fleeting Expertise, and Rejuvenation. With this build, I produce 2 Rumblers, each with 1845 armor and 12,648 health. Now, if you watch my previous videos, you will know that the primary rationale behind this build is to focus on landslide. But with armor ratings of 1845, they only take around 14 damage for every 100 dealt. Having 2 Rumblers that each have somewhere in the neighborhood of 90,000 effective hit points means it isn't going to really matter what's thrown at them. Their damage may remain unimpressive, but it still works good enough as a distraction, and using them as suicide bombers isn't going to get you very far either, since they deal in the neighborhood of 2,700 damage upon eruption. That much will really help in the star chart for a while, but since they have a mind of their own, it's kind of difficult to use the explosion in any serious capacity, let alone any controlled capacity. Build 2, Gorgomancer 2.0. This build consists of Power Drift, Titanic Rumbler, Blind Rage, Prime Continuity, Intensify, Streamline, Vitality, Steel Fiber, Constitution, and Stand United. The rationale behind this build is similar to what we use with the standard Gorgomancer loadout, where you let your summons do the talking, but for this, the enemies tend to be a little bit better bunched up, since there's only a single Rumbler to make use of. So rather than a sniper rifle, I focus more on AoE weapons that can be shot from afar, like the Ogress, Tonkor, Angstrom, or Kolstar. The Titan's health sits at 19,512 with an armor value of 1897, which won't produce much of a difference from the 14% on the Raimish Banish build, except that with the health bonus of Gorgomancer, their effective health sits around 140,000. Now I usually wait for Arcane Guardian to proc before casting, which brings the armor up significantly, raising their armor to 2197. This 1% or so level 2 damage mitigation may not seem significant, but when you're dealing with these numbers, it causes a drastic change from 140,000 to somewhere in the neighborhood of 155,000 effective hit points, taking around 12.5 damage for each 100 dealt to them. With such an enormous effective health pool, I took it for a spin, replacing Fortitude and Streamline with Narrow-Minded. Now facing off against 20 level 145 corrupted heavy gunners in the Simulacrum, it lived the entire 105 seconds and it still had barely half of its health remaining. Then I tried it with the same amount and level of corrupted bombards and it still lived with health remaining. I will be the first to say though that these numbers may be off, but not so much in the way that you may think. You see, the stats for Titanic Rumbler aren't reflected on the ability screen, and since it's an alternate source of damage, I can't seem to quantify if the massive amount of power strength increases the damage buff or the health buff, just from the augment alone. So it could be possible that what I presented was significantly lower than the actual numbers. The third build, 11th Labor. This build is a spin on the previous two, but it makes for the most use of both Rumblers and Landslide. The build includes Power Drift, Titanic Rumbler, Blind Rage, Energy Conversion, Narrow-Minded, Streamline, Armored Agility, Steel Fiber, Fleeting Expertise, and Stand United. Named after the Herculean feat of taking the weight of the sky off of the shoulders of the Titan himself, that is precisely what we aim to do with this. Only it will require much more than just a build to accomplish this at a reasonable level. To supplement, we will equip the Vinca Prime for higher damage multipliers, equipped with all 4 90% elementals, base damage, and a few critical mods. We equip full sets of Arcane Guardian and Arcane Strike. I also run this build with Naramon attached. Now, of course, I can hear some of the people snickering behind their laptops because Naramon makes any frame powerful. Yeah, I get it. However, they still have area of effects to worry about, but Atlas compounds multipliers like few frames do while maintaining his durability. I also equip an Adarza Cavet with Cat's Eye pretty much as the only power equipped. With this loadout, you and your Rumbler deal additional critical damage with Cat's Eye, but yours stacks with the Stealth multiplier, the combo multipliers, and if using Landslide, with the 2 and 4 times damage multipliers, leading to catastrophic levels of demolition that immediately delivers you into the realm of ultraviolet coitus. In this build, I forego vitality because the enemies are unable to target, but if I happen to be hit by an AoE, my armor will cover the difference. Essentially, you are making yourself untargetable, gaining massive stacking multipliers, all the while the spawn is being drawn directly to an indestructible Titanic Rumbler, taking all the heat off of you. And the icing on the cake is that the critical chance from Cat's Eye will work on your Landslide, effectively doubling at base all of the already ridiculous numbers that he produces and making critical mods more relevant on your melee weapon while using Atlas. For me, I like to call this the Loki 2.0 loadout on occasion because it can effectively emulate Loki's stealth combat, only the decoy is mobile and actually durable. And even having unaugmented health and shields, it still has 1377 armor, greatly mitigating enemy fire. This means that Atlas can take around 17 damage for every 100 dealt to him, granting him around 2,000 effective health after shields. It's not a lot, but it's more than enough to account for the AoEs in the late game. As I'm sure you know, negative power strength will produce a few dwarven golems who are cute as a button, and the range gain from overextended will make them some fast little buggers, but of course it will be nice if their speed wasn't capped the way it was. It would kind of make range a lot more viable on them. But we all know that this must be by design. I mean, fathom the insanity of having the power to summon extremely powerful golems who could tank, blow up at 4500, and could fly to the enemies like Volt on a meth cocktail. Now, I put a lot of thought in Atlas, but I have some hangups with him. I always prefer to make a kit work together, but there's so many partitions with Atlas that it takes a lot of possible fun away from him in that respect. Literally no two of his powers are confirmed to work with one another in any real way, some hampering the possibility and efficacy of using others. Tectonics blocks both Landslide and Petrify. Petrify cannot be used in tandem with Landslide and prevents the use of any other power while active. It provides no true synergy with them at all. Rumblers maintains consistency with the others in that respect, in that it does nothing to truly supplement the other powers in any real way. Sure, it draws attention away, but when you can stagger, slow, or petrify enemies, wall them off from you, or even just remain invincible while spamming landslide, it just kinda takes away the significance of having diversions. Plus, the damage isn't significant enough to use as a primary form of DPS, when you can landslide to deal 70 times the amount of damage. At the end of the day, all of his powers are fairly solid, some more than others, yes, but they are so far removed from one another that despite all of them being fairly good on their own, there's really no reason to flow between them that I can see. Now, I'm sure that some of you probably feel differently, and if you have found synergy in them, please share it in the comments below. I can revisit them with that information in mind. But that's it for today, Tenno. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you like what I do though, go ahead and hit that like button. If you think someone could benefit from it, go ahead and share it. But until next time, this is Fen, signing off.